This is Sid Roth saying, I have a vision. Now is the set time to blow the trumpet in Zion.
Blow a trumpet in Zion, sounding on the mountain. Blow a trumpet in Zion, for the day of the Lord is come.
Shalom, Mishpocha. Shalom, family. Mishpocha is a Hebrew word. It means family. We're the Mishpocha, the family with a Jewish heart, made up of Jewish and non-Jewish people that are one new man in the Messiah, getting ready, Mishpocha, to blow the grandest shofar, or the grandest trumpet in Zion. We want everyone, everywhere, to hear the good news. We want everyone, everywhere, to be red hot for the Messiah. My guest, by way of telephone, I'm speaking to him at his office in Millerstown, Pennsylvania, is John McTernan. John was a federal agent for 26 years with the Internal Security Division of IRS. He also is co-founder of International Cops for Christ, and he has authored a book that you must read. The title, God's Final Warning to America, in which John has documented sins that have occurred, like Gay Pride Day or big pro-abortion type of rallies, or anti-Semitic, anti-Israel stances by the U.S., and the exact day judgment hits. Out of curiosity, John, have other people seen? I mean, this is too much. It's not just one or two times. It's over and over and over again. Have other people been aware of this before they saw your book?
Sid, I can say that people are really not aware of it. What they've told me, as I have spoken throughout the nation, is we knew we were in the judgment. We've seen these earthquakes and the hurricanes and that. We knew we were in the judgment, but we just didn't put it together like you have. So I seem to be a catalyst for a lot of people in that it ties together what they knew was occurring, but just didn't have it exactly down pat.
How about people that have never even thought about this? What effect does it have when they see the sin and the judgment occurring same day in America?
Yeah, I've had people tell me that it's stunned, that they were like paralyzed when they realized that God was so real. That it wasn't like something way off in the future, that it was happening like right under their noses, and that the authority of God's word became so real to them that they were paralyzed when they saw it.
Okay, I'm going to have a lot of people upset if I don't pose the question to you we ended with on yesterday's broadcast, and that is President Clinton, as we know, was humiliated internationally on a specific day when the affair with Lewinsky became public. But what else happened on that specific day?
Well, Sid, on that day, he had met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who then was the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, over, again, my expression is carving up the covenant land. And he was using the power of the United States to pressure Netanyahu into this peace process. So he had just finished with Netanyahu, and it was either a half hour or an hour in between, where he was then going to meet with Yasser Arafat for the same purpose. During that downtime of approximately a half hour to an hour, while Arafat was waiting to meet with him, that's when the president was told about the breaking of the Lewinsky scandal. Exactly as he was going to meet with Arafat, that scandal broke.
Do you have any?
Not an hour later or an hour before. I mean, exactly as Arafat was waiting for him, that scandal broke.
All right. Is there any doubt that that's a direct correlation of a judgment from God?
Well, this is the way I look at it, Sid. He was humiliating Israel, and then at the exact time, he was humiliated.
Now, you list, I mean, even when people like Arafat come to the United States and try to solicit the United States to be anti-Israel, what happens to our stock market?
Sid, while you were talking, I have my book in front of me, and I was counting the number of times Arafat has come here and we have had judgments fall on us, and it's 9. And actually, I have one that's in addition to the book, which if we get a chance, I'll speak with. So I have 10 instances when Arafat has come that disaster has hit us. And
give me some specific examples.
Okay, so we have March 2nd, 1997, and Arafat comes to meet with former President Clinton in Washington. And on that same day, now I'm going to try and, there's been so many disasters, it may be hard for you to remember, but if you think back to 1997, there was a city in Arkansas, which ironically is the president's home state. It's called Arkadelphia. It was literally taken.
That was President Clinton's home state. Go ahead.
Yes, former President Clinton. It was literally taken off the map. With up to that time was considered the worst tornado storm in the United States history. The tornadoes went across Arkansas, doing $billion worth of damage, and they went into the storm settled over Ohio, resulting in torrential rains that caused the worst flooding in 100 years in Ohio. That all started the very day Arafat came to meet with President Clinton over the covenant land of Israel. Just incredible storms hit. And in fact, the flooding ended up taking the city of Falmouth, Kentucky, right off the map. So with Arafat here, we had 2 small cities in the United States literally taken off the map with storms. And then Arafat went to the United Nations. Sid, do you remember back in 1997 when the whole world was upset because Israel was building homes in East Jerusalem?
Yeah, of course.
It was called Har Homa.
Yes.
Remember that?
I do.
Right. Well, Arafat, that's why he met with President Clinton then. Can you imagine over Israel building homes? The whole world was literally upset. He met with President Clinton, then Arafat went to the United Nations. The very day he went to the United Nations, the stock market had reached, up until that point, its zenith. From that day on, while he was here, because he stayed for about a week or 2 more, and then President Clinton was condemning Netanyahu for not going along with the peace plan and building these homes and all that. The stock market free-falled for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of points until Netanyahu came in August and met with President Clinton, and then President Clinton dropped the attack on Israel over, because you don't hear about it anymore, correct, about Har Homa? The whole attack ended, Arafat went home, and the stock market went back up to the very day. So the very day Arafat came to and spoke to the United Nations and was demanding, condemning Israel, the United Nations was condemning Israel. In that period of time, Israel was condemned 4 times by the General Council and by the Security Council. The stock market was literally going out of control and free fall. And then it all ended, and the stock market started its upward progression again. We're not talking about a week before and a week after. We're talking about starting on the very day. So that's really when I noticed the correlation with Arafat. That's the first time I noticed the judgment falling over Israel. Then we go to January 21st, 1998, and that's the question you just asked me before about Lewinsky. Arafat was here. The scandal broke out. September 27th, 1998, Arafat is meeting with the president in Washington. Now, Hurricane, I'm going to pronounce it right. It's Georges. It's not George. It's Hurricane Georges. Hits Alabama, and it stalls. I've documented that the hurricane almost hit the very time Arafat landed in the United States. He met with the former Secretary of State, Albright. He stayed 3 days to meet with the president and the former president and the former Secretary of State. He then spoke at the United Nations, and he left. For those exact 3 days, the hurricane stalled in the Gulf of Mexico. It sat half in the Gulf and half hitting Alabama and Mississippi. And then when he left, the hurricane dissipated, and that was the end of it. So for the exact 3 days he was here, the Gulf Coast was being racked by Hurricane Georges that did, I think, $2 billion. I forget, it did several $1 billion worth of damage. The exact time that Yasser Arafat was here.
In your book, you document every time we go against Israel, every time we have homosexual events, every time we have pro-murder or pro-abortion events, there is judgment that hits on the precise day. Let's go to, and you call this warning judgments. Is there a chance that God will change his mind?
Sid, I can't speak for God, but I think we've crossed a threshold now where when you start marrying homosexuals and you call it civil rights, because God's plan, even before the fall, Sid, when you look in Genesis chapter 1, was a man and a woman and a family. That's God's plan from the beginning. When you start tampering with that and marrying homosexuals and then attack people that stand against that, we've reached a realm, Sid, that is what I call reprobate. When you can take a baby out of the mother, except for a little bit of the skull, and crack the skull open and suck the brains out and kill the baby, and that's a constitutional right, we've crossed a threshold, Sid, where I don't know if we can come back from. When you disregard God's word and his covenant with the people of Israel, and you say, I'm going to force you to give a third of Jerusalem away where the Temple Mount is, in the land of Judea and Samaria, we've crossed the threshold, Sid. And I think in these three areas, we've crossed the threshold where our prayer now has to be to have mercy and judgment.
Well, I interviewed Nita Johnson, who's received the same type of prophetic warnings from God, and she is saying the same thing. The only prayer at this point is to stall judgment for the sake of revival. However, there are so few believers that have the information that you've assembled in this book. But you've said to me time and time again that God supernaturally put this documentation into your hands. Mishpucha, if it was the same week, then we could call these things coincidence. But one sin after another that is publicly documented, and the exact day that the sin occurs, you can see a judgment hit America. On tomorrow's broadcast, I would like you to talk just a bit about the abortion issue and the direct correlation of judgments that have occurred to the United States of America. Mishpocha, this book so documents these facts, I think the greatest skeptic would have to say, there is a God, and there is a consequence for sin. $14 postage paid for God's final warning to America.
If you would like to receive a complimentary copy of our bi-monthly teaching newsletter, cassette catalog, or information about becoming Mishpocha, write to me, Sid Roth, Post Office Box 1918, Brunswick, Georgia, 31521. Or call our order-only line, 1-800-548-1918. To place a credit card order, call anytime, 1-800-548-1918. For all other calls, the number is 912-265-2500. That's 912-265-2500. For a cassette tape of this week's broadcast, send $5 to Sid Roth, Post Office Box 1918, Brunswick, Georgia, 31521. Look us up on the web, www.sidroth.org. That's www.sidroth.org.